He accidentally wed an alien queen, and his world was never the same. Eric Lane had never planned to be famous, or important, or a hero of any kind. He had spent his life flying small ships across the edges of human space, delivering cargo, helping colonists, and sometimes taking dangerous trips to worlds that most humans avoided. He liked his quiet life. He liked knowing where he was going and what he was carrying. Adventure was not something he sought. Trouble, however, seemed to have a way of finding him. The mission that brought him to the planet Jara was supposed to be simple. The Galactic Council had asked for a human representative to attend a ceremony with the Jaran people. They were a proud and ancient alien race, known across many systems for their strict laws, strange traditions, and beautiful cities carved into cliffs of crystal-like stone. Eric did not know much about them, but the council assured him it was safe. He was only supposed to attend the ceremony and watch as Queen Lyra, the ruler of the Jaran Empire, welcomed diplomats from other planets. That was all. He was just a guest. When Eric's small ship descended toward the main city of Jara, he could not help but be amazed. The buildings were tall and glimmered in the light of the twin suns. Bridges of shining metal connected towers that spiraled into the sky, and ships of all sizes moved gracefully in the air like schools of fish. He had seen space stations, colonies, and even floating cities, but nothing like this. Nothing that looked so alive and yet so structured. The landing platform was crowded with beings of all shapes and sizes. The Jaran people themselves were taller than humans, with smooth skin that shimmered faintly in colors like silver and soft blue. Their eyes were large and dark, and their expressions were often hard to read. Eric tried to stand tall, though he felt awkward in his human body among such elegant beings. He had been given a simple suit for the ceremony, and it felt stiff and strange, but at least it was clean. A Jaran official stepped forward, bowing in a way that seemed both formal and delicate. He spoke in the Jaran language, and a translator built into Eric's wrist device interpreted quickly. "Welcome, Eric Lane, human of the Sol system. You honor our planet with your presence. Follow me to the ceremony hall. The Queen awaits." Eric nodded and followed, keeping his head low. The hall was massive, larger than any room he had ever seen. The ceiling stretched high above, carved with patterns that glowed softly. Crystal chandeliers hung like frozen waterfalls, reflecting light across the walls. Hundreds of Jaran officials and diplomats filled the hall, all facing the center where a raised platform held a throne unlike any Eric had imagined. It was carved from a single piece of glowing crystal and shimmered with colors that seemed almost alive. And sitting on that throne was Queen Lyra. She was taller than most Jaran, her presence strong and commanding. Her hair flowed like silver water, and her eyes were dark and deep, seeming to see everything at once. Eric felt a nervous knot in his stomach. He had never met royalty, and now he was in the presence of someone who seemed more like a goddess than a ruler. The ceremony began with music that vibrated in the chest. Jaran instruments created sound unlike anything Eric had heard. It was beautiful and strange, filling the hall with rhythms that seemed to tell stories without words. Officials began to speak, their voices translating into his device. They spoke of peace, of alliances, of the importance of cooperation between worlds. Eric listened, nodding at the right moments, feeling more like a visitor at a performance than a participant in politics. Then came the part that changed everything. A Jaran official approached him and began a ritual that Eric did not understand. He noticed that the translator on his wrist suddenly began to speak faster, translating every word of a language he barely knew. "By the laws of Jaran tradition," the official said, "the human present at the ceremony shall be joined to the queen to symbolize the bond between species." Eric froze. He had misheard. "Joined to the queen?" he asked quietly, looking at the translator. "What does that mean?" "It is customary for a guest of honor to be declared consort," the translator said. "It is an honor. It is necessary for the ceremony to continue." Eric blinked. He had no idea what he was supposed to do. His heart was racing. He tried to protest, to explain that he was not anyone's consort, that he had no authority, no right, and certainly no intention to be married to anyone. But before he could speak, the official had touched a small crystal to his wrist. A soft hum filled the hall. The music swelled. The translator explained, "By law, the bond is formed. You are now the human consort of Queen Lyra." Eric's jaw dropped. He looked at Lyra, who sat silently, her expression unreadable. He wanted to speak, to say something, but the words would not come. Around him, the crowd of Jaran cheered quietly, some raising hands in respect, some bowing deeply. Every eye seemed to be on him, waiting for him to react in the correct way. He had accidentally become a king's consort, or in this case, a queen's consort. He did not know what that meant, what he was allowed to do, or what would happen next. All he knew was that his simple life of flying ships and delivering cargo had ended in one moment. He was married to an alien queen. After the ceremony, officials led him through the palace corridors, explaining his duties. Eric listened politely, though inside he felt completely lost. He was supposed to attend meetings, greet ambassadors, and show respect to traditions he barely understood. Every step made him feel like a performer in a play he had never rehearsed for. Later, Lyra summoned him to a private chamber. Eric entered nervously, expecting anger or at least a sharp rebuke. Instead, the queen stood calmly, her eyes studying him. "You are surprised," she said in the translator's voice. Yes," Eric said. "I didn't mean I don't understand what happened." "You are human," Lyra said. "That is clear. You are unprepared, but the law is the law and you are now my consort." Eric swallowed. "I'm not sure I even know what that means. Do I live here now?" Lyra nodded. "For now, yes. You will be with me during court functions. You will learn our ways. If you refuse, the bond will cause offense to many and our alliance will weaken." Eric ran a hand through his hair. He had thought this would be a simple mission. He had imagined a meeting, a few handshakes, maybe some small talk about trade agreements. He had never imagined this. And yet, despite the fear and confusion, he felt something else, a flicker of curiosity. He wanted to understand these people, this queen, this strange world. The first few days were a whirlwind of instruction. Servants guided him through meals that were strange but delicious, rooms that seemed to shift shape as if alive, and customs that felt almost impossible to remember. He learned how to bow correctly, how to greet officials without offense, and even how to wear ceremonial robes that weighed more than he thought possible. Every mistake he made was noted politely, corrected quietly, and sometimes laughed at gently. He began to realize that Lyra watched him carefully, not with anger but with interest. One evening, after the sun had set behind Jara's twin moons, Eric found himself on a balcony overlooking the city. The lights glimmered like stars, and ships moved silently through the air. He thought about Earth, about his family, about the quiet life he had left behind. He wondered how he would ever explain this to anyone. "I accidentally married an alien queen," he muttered under his breath. The words sounded ridiculous, even to him. And yet, as he looked at the vast city, the towering crystal spires, and the gentle light on Lyra's face as she joined him on the balcony, he realized something else. Perhaps this accident was not only chaos. Perhaps it was also an opportunity. He could learn from this world, understand its people, and maybe, just maybe, become more than he had ever imagined. He did not know what the future held. He did not know if he could survive the politics, the expectations, or the dangers of the Jaran Empire. But for the first time in his life, Eric Lane felt that his life, however strange and frightening, was about to be extraordinary. And somewhere deep inside, he could not help but wonder what it would be like to really know the queen he had accidentally wed. Eric woke early, the light of the twin suns just beginning to touch the crystal towers of Jara. His first night in the palace had been restless. He had tossed and turned, thinking about the ceremony, the sudden marriage, and the strange weight of responsibility that now sat on his shoulders. He had never wanted power, never wanted to lead, never wanted to be part of politics. But now, it seemed, the galaxy had decided otherwise. Breakfast was served in a room with walls that glowed softly. Eric sat across from Queen Lyra, who ate calmly and gracefully, her movements precise and almost hypnotic. She had explained little the night before about the customs of the Jarin court, so everything he did felt like a test. He picked up the unfamiliar utensils awkwardly and tried to follow her movements. "You are clumsy with them," Lyra said quietly, not unkindly. Her voice, even through the translator, had a rhythm that was both firm and gentle. I'll get better," Eric replied, putting down the strange fork and spoon combination. "I'm not used to this kind of meal." "You will learn," Lyra said. "In time, the court will test you. They will see if you are worthy of being my consort. If you fail, it could reflect poorly on both of us." Eric nodded. He wanted to ask what worthy meant in a world so different from his own, but he realized that he did not even know the questions to ask. Instead, he focused on eating and not spilling anything on the glowing tablecloth. After breakfast, Lyra led him through the palace corridors. The halls seemed endless. Eric had begun to notice that the palace itself seemed alive. Doors opened before he reached them, lights adjusted to his presence, and small creatures scuttled along unseen paths, tidying and observing. He was fascinated and overwhelmed at the same time. "You will meet the council today," Lyra said as they walked. "They decide the laws, the policies, the trade agreements. They will want to speak with you, and you must answer carefully. You are not only a human, you are a symbol. They will watch everything you do." Eric swallowed. "I've never been in politics," he said honestly. "I don't know how to answer people like that." Lyra smiled faintly. "Then speak the truth. Do not pretend to know what you do not. That will earn respect faster than lies." The council chamber was larger than the main hall he had first entered. Hundreds of Jarin filled the space, sitting in high-backed chairs carved from crystal. They murmured among themselves as Eric and Lyra entered, and all eyes seemed to focus on him. Eric felt small, human, and fragile among beings who were taller, stronger, and older than he could imagine. The council president, a silver-skinned Jarin named Talon, spoke first. "Consort Eric Lane, we welcome you. We are curious about your people and your intentions. The Queen has brought you here as a symbol of cooperation. Speak now and let us know why humans should be trusted." Eric's heart pounded. He had not prepared any speech. He had not even considered that he would have to talk to a council like this. He looked at Lyra for guidance. She gave a small nod, and he realized he had no choice. He had to speak. "My people," he began, "we are not perfect. We have made mistakes. We have fought wars and caused harm. But we have also learned. We have survived. We have created, built, and helped each other. I am here because I want peace, because I want to understand, because I want to make sure humans and Jarin can work together. That is all I can promise." The council murmured. Some nodded, others whispered to each other. Eric felt sweat on his brow but kept speaking. "I do not know your ways yet. I do not know your customs, but I am willing to learn. I am willing to try, and I will not betray the trust of the Queen or your people." Talon studied him, tilting his head. "You are honest," he said finally, "but honesty is not enough. Actions must follow words. You will face many tests. Remember that." Eric nodded, swallowing hard. He had survived the first challenge, but he knew it was only the beginning. After the council meeting, Lyra led him to a training area. He had assumed training would involve military exercises, but it was something different. The Jarin moved with precision, and they practiced what Eric could only describe as a combination of physical skill and mental control. They used gestures, lights, and energy fields to test focus, reaction, and understanding. Eric felt clumsy and slow at first. His human body was not designed for such precise movements. "You must trust your instincts," Lyra said. "You will fail if you overthink. Humans rely on improvisation, and that is a strength. Learn to combine it with our discipline." Eric tried again. He moved his hands as instructed, focusing on the energy field in front of him. At first, nothing happened. Then slowly the field responded, bending and shifting as he commanded. A small smile appeared on Lyra's face. "Better," she said. "You have potential. Do not underestimate yourself." Days passed in a blur. Eric learned the palace routines, the laws of Jaran society, and the subtle ways of court politics. He began to notice small gestures, small hints of respect or suspicion in every glance. He was constantly aware of the council watching him, the servants observing him, and the queen silently judging his every word. He also learned more about Lyra. She was not only beautiful and powerful but also intelligent, cautious, and curious. Sometimes she would speak quietly to him about her own world, about the history of her people, about struggles he could barely imagine. Eric listened, fascinated. He found himself respecting her, not only as a queen, but as someone who carried the weight of an entire empire on her shoulders. One evening, as they walked along the palace balcony again, Lyra spoke softly. "You are learning faster than I expected," she said. "Most humans would be lost entirely. You are adaptable." Eric chuckled nervously. "I don't feel adaptable. I feel like a fool half the time." "That is the human way," she said. "You make mistakes, you struggle, but you continue. That is something we admire, even if we do not always understand it." Eric realized that he was beginning to feel more comfortable, not only with the customs but with Lyra herself. Her calm presence, her steady gaze, and her willingness to explain things patiently made the impossible feel possible. He was still terrified of the responsibilities, but he was learning, step by step. Then came the first real challenge. A delegation from a neighboring system arrived, demanding immediate trade agreements and access to Jaran resources. The council expected Lyra and her consort to meet them immediately. Eric had never negotiated anything more complex than a shipping contract. He had no experience with alien diplomacy, and yet the eyes of the Jaran, the council, and the visiting delegation were all on him. He took a deep breath, remembering Lyra's advice. "Speak the truth," she had said. "Do not pretend to know what you do not." When the delegation began with aggressive demands, Eric listened carefully. He did not interrupt. He allowed Lyra to speak when necessary but offered his own words when asked. "We are willing to discuss trade," he said simply, "but we must consider what is fair for all parties. I do not know all your needs, but I can promise honesty and effort. That is all I can offer now." The delegation looked at him, some with surprise, some with amusement. They were not used to humans being so direct, so unpretentious. Lyra placed a hand lightly on his arm, a signal of support, and Eric continued. Slowly, the meeting moved from tension to discussion, and by the end, a tentative agreement was reached. The council watched in silence. Later, Talon approached Eric privately. "You surprised us," he said. "Humans are simple in ways, yet you have a strength that is rare. Do not waste it. Learn to use it wisely." Eric nodded, exhausted but proud. He realized that he had done something he never thought possible. He had stood in front of powerful beings and spoken as an equal, as a human, without pretending to be something he was not. That night, Eric and Lyra walked along the palace balcony, the city lights stretching below them. "You did well today," she said quietly. "I just spoke the truth," Eric replied. "I don't feel like I did anything special." "You did," Lyra said softly. "You showed courage. You showed that humans are not easily intimidated. That is rare even among us." Eric looked at her, realizing that his life had changed completely. He had gone from a simple pilot to a consort of a powerful queen, and yet he felt a strange sense of purpose. For the first time, he felt that he might be able to make a difference, not just for himself, but for the people of Jara, for his own people, and for the fragile connection between worlds. And as the twin moons rose over the city, casting silver light across the towers, Eric Lane understood something he had never known before. Being married to a queen, being part of a world so different from his own, was not just about ceremony or law. It was about courage, understanding, and the quiet power of being human in a universe that had never seen one like him. He did not know what tomorrow would bring, or the day after that, but he knew he was ready to face it. Eric had begun to understand the palace, the people, and even the strange ways of the Jaran. He was still clumsy with their customs, still unsure of his place, but he was learning. Each day brought new lessons, and each day he realized that being a consort of the queen was far more complicated than he had imagined. The real test came unexpectedly. One morning, as Eric was walking through the gardens with Lyra, a sudden alarm sounded across the city. Red lights flashed along the palace walls, and loud sirens echoed in the corridors. Servants ran past with worried faces, and guards rushed to their stations. Eric's heart pounded. He had no idea what was happening. Lyra remained calm. "Something is wrong," she said quietly. "A rival faction within the council is attempting a coup. They believe I am too weak to rule with a human at my side. We must act quickly." Eric froze. "A coup," he whispered, "but I don't know anything about fighting or politics like that. What can I do?" "You are human," Lyra said. "You see things differently. That can be an advantage. Come with me." They ran through the palace corridors, moving toward the council chamber. Soldiers and guards blocked some passages, but Lyra used her authority to guide them through secret doors. Eric noticed that the walls themselves seemed to respond to her, shifting slightly as if recognizing her command. He had never seen anything like it. When they arrived, the council chamber was in chaos. Some council members were already being restrained by the palace guards, while others shouted and tried to flee. Lyra stepped onto the raised platform, her voice calm and commanding. "This palace belongs to the Jaran people. Those who attempt to seize it by force will be judged according to the law." Eric felt panic rising again. The council was not only powerful, but the rival faction had armed guards, and he had no idea how to fight or defend anyone. Yet he also felt something familiar, the instinct to act, to find a way through a problem, to protect those who depended on him. A soldier approached him, bowing quickly. "Consort, what should we do?" Eric took a deep breath. "We need to lock the chamber doors and secure the exits. Then we need to separate the rival members from the loyal ones. Keep the civilians safe." The soldier hesitated. Eric realized they were looking for guidance, for someone to lead. Eric nodded at himself. He was only human, but he could think, and thinking mattered more than strength sometimes. He ran to one side of the chamber, signaling guards to follow him. Using quick thinking, he blocked the side doors with movable panels, creating choke points that slowed the rivals. His mind worked fast, remembering every detail of the corridors and secret passages Lyra had shown him. He moved like someone who had studied strategy all his life, even though he had never done anything like this before. Lyra watched him, her eyes wide with surprise. She had expected her human consort to panic, to hide, or to make mistakes. Instead, Eric moved calmly, issuing instructions, checking on guards, and even signaling civilians to safer areas. Then, the leader of the rival faction appeared. He was a tall Jaran with dark silver skin and sharp eyes. He carried a weapon that glowed with energy, and his presence radiated authority and menace. Eric froze for a moment, seeing the danger clearly, but then he remembered Lyra's words about human improvisation. He grabbed a small energy device from a nearby console, not knowing exactly how it worked, and pressed a series of buttons he hoped would create a diversion. A bright flash filled the room, and a low hum vibrated the floor. The rival leader staggered back, momentarily disoriented. "Now!" Eric shouted. The guards moved in, restraining the rival faction members. Eric had no idea if what he had done was correct, but it worked. The chamber was secure and the threat was contained. Lyra stepped down from the platform, her face unreadable. Then she placed a hand on Eric's shoulder. "You acted quickly. You did not panic. You saved lives. You have the mind of a strategist, human or not." Eric felt a rush of relief. He had not known he could do this. He had thought humans were weak compared to the Jaren, that their advanced technology and long history made them superior. But in that moment, he realized that humans had something else: instinct, adaptability, and courage in the face of danger. The aftermath of the coup attempt was chaotic. The council held an emergency session to discuss punishment for the rebels. Eric attended, still unsure how he fit into all this. Many council members were shocked to see him there, participating in decisions. Lyra allowed him to speak, and he shared his observations and suggestions for improving palace security. His ideas were simple, practical, and effective. The Jaren had relied on tradition for so long that a human perspective felt almost revolutionary. Some council members were skeptical, but others began to nod. Eric could see the beginnings of respect forming. He was not just a consort by law, he was proving himself in action. Over the next few days, Eric worked tirelessly alongside Lyra and her advisors. He learned to read reports quickly, identify threats before they became dangerous, and even negotiate with minor officials who were loyal to the rival faction. Each success, no matter how small, built his confidence. He began to feel that maybe humans could be more than simple creatures in a galaxy of advanced beings. One evening, after a long day of planning and meetings, Lyra invited Eric to the observation deck. The twin suns had set, leaving the sky dark with stars, and the city of Jara glowed below them. Eric leaned against the railing, exhausted but exhilarated. "You are changing the way the court sees you," Lyra said. "Not many humans could do what you did." Eric shook his head. "I didn't plan to do anything. I just acted. I tried to help." "That is what humans do," Lyra said softly. "You are different from the Jaren. You do not rely only on tradition, on history, on rules. You rely on instinct. That is dangerous, yes, but it is also powerful." Eric looked at her. He realized he was beginning to understand her, not only as a queen but as a person. He was beginning to care about her, not only because he was married to her by accident, but because she was strong, intelligent, and unlike anyone he had ever met. The next challenge came from outside the palace. Word of the attempted coup had spread across the empire. Some neighboring systems saw it as a chance to push for control, testing the Jaren defenses. Reports came of small attacks on trade routes and border stations. Eric was included in the strategy meetings. He listened carefully, learning the language of military tactics, even if only in a basic form. When one station was threatened, Eric suggested a plan that relied on timing and misdirection rather than brute force. The Jaren officers were skeptical at first, but Lyra allowed him to lead a small team. Using Eric's plan, the station was reinforced without direct conflict, and the attackers were forced to retreat. The success caused a stir in the empire. Humans were not known for tactical brilliance in alien warfare. Eric had proven that even a single human, thinking clearly and acting decisively, could change the course of events. Lyra smiled at him quietly, and he felt a strange pride. Life in the palace began to change for Eric. He was no longer just a consort by accident. He was a partner, a trusted advisor, and someone who could influence the Jaren Empire in small but meaningful ways. He began to train more, learning the arts of diplomacy, strategy, and court etiquette. He spent time with the guards, learning their techniques and understanding their discipline. He observed Lyra closely, trying to understand not only her commands but her thought processes. One afternoon, a young Jaren child approached him in the gardens. The child had heard of Eric's actions during the coup and looked at him with wide, curious eyes. "Are humans really strong?" the child asked. Eric knelt down, smiling gently. "Strength is not just about size or power. It's about courage, about trying your best even when you are afraid." The child nodded slowly, as if understanding a truth too simple and too important. Eric realized then that his presence in the Empire was changing more than the council or the palace guards. It was changing the way Jarin saw humans. Even as he worked and learned, Eric still made mistakes. He spilled drinks at official dinners, mispronounced important names, and misunderstood customs. But Lyra and others corrected him gently, and slowly he began to blend human instinct with Jarin discipline. He was becoming something new, a bridge between worlds. Late one night, Eric stood alone on the balcony, looking at the stars. He thought about Earth, about his family, and about the life he had left behind. He realized he no longer missed it as much as he expected. This world, with all its strangeness, its danger, and its beauty, had become part of him. And for the first time, he felt that he belonged somewhere that mattered. He also realized that the bond with Lyra was changing. It was no longer simply a law or ceremony. There was respect, understanding, and even trust. He felt a strange warmth when she was near, a sense that together they could face almost anything. Eric Lane, the accidental human consort, had survived his first real test. He had faced political chaos, threats of violence, and the skepticism of an entire empire. And through it all, he had proven that humans were more than fragile creatures. They were clever, adaptable, and courageous. As the twin moons rose over Jara, casting silver light across the towers, Eric knew that more challenges were coming. He did not know what they would be, but he was ready. He was human, yes, but he was also something more now, a part of the Jaran world, a partner to a queen, and a force that even the strongest could not ignore. And deep inside, he felt a quiet determination. He would continue to learn, to grow, and to show the galaxy that humans, no matter how small or ordinary they seemed, could make a difference in ways no one expected. The days following the failed coup were tense but hopeful. Eric had begun to find a rhythm in his life at the palace. He attended meetings, offered advice, and even participated in some military planning. Yet, despite his successes, he still felt the weight of his position. Being the human consort of a queen was not just a title. It was responsibility, scrutiny, and constant pressure. One morning, Lyra summoned him to her private chambers. Eric felt a mix of curiosity and nervousness. Lyra rarely asked to speak to him alone without reason, and he had learned that in her world, nothing happened without purpose. "Eric," she said as he entered, her voice calm but serious, "we have received troubling news." Eric frowned. "What is it?" "A delegation from the planet Veshar has arrived unexpectedly. They claim to have urgent information regarding threats to the Empire. However, I suspect they are testing us. They may be spies or provocateurs." Eric felt a knot in his stomach. Spies, tests, threats. He had faced unexpected danger before, but the idea of espionage made him uneasy. He had learned some tactics during the coup attempt, but intelligence work was different. It required patience, careful observation, and subtlety, qualities he knew he did not naturally possess. "You must meet them," Lyra continued. "I will be present, of course, but you will speak with them as my consort. They will judge us by your words, by your reactions, by your ability to understand and respond. This is a test of trust, human." Eric nodded, trying to hide his nervousness. He had survived crises before, but this felt different. The stakes were invisible, hidden behind words, gestures, and silence. He was not sure if he could read the intentions of beings so different from him. The Veshar delegation arrived in sleek, dark ships that contrasted sharply with the bright spires of Jara. The aliens themselves were smaller than the Jaran, with thin, angular bodies and sharp, intelligent eyes. They moved with quick, precise gestures, and their voices had a musical tone that was difficult for Eric's translator to capture fully. As they entered the palace chamber, Eric tried to remain calm. He greeted them politely, bowing as Lyra had taught him, and spoke slowly, carefully choosing his words. "Welcome to Jara," he said. "We are honored by your visit and hope to hear what you have to share." The leader of the delegation, a female Veshar named Kira, studied him intently. "You are the human consort?" she asked, her tone neutral but sharp. "We have heard of your actions during the recent coup. It is unusual for a human to be involved in your empire's affairs at this level." Eric nodded. "I am learning. I do my best to understand and to help where I can. That is all I can offer." Kira's eyes narrowed slightly. "Words are easy. Actions are what matter. Can a human truly understand our needs, our politics, our dangers?" Eric felt a flicker of determination. He may have been small, ordinary, and inexperienced, but he had learned to trust himself. "I do not know everything," he said honestly, "but I can observe, learn, and act. That is all any of us can do in a complicated world. I have acted when it mattered, and I will continue to act when needed." The room was silent for a moment. Kira's expression did not change, but Eric sensed that he had made an impression. Lyra placed a hand lightly on his arm, a gesture of support and confidence. Over the next hours, the delegation presented information about Vesharian movements, possible rebellions in nearby systems, and rumors of alien mercenaries gathering near the border. Eric listened carefully, taking notes and asking questions when necessary. He began to notice patterns in the delegation's statements, tiny inconsistencies, subtle shifts in tone, hints of hidden intentions. He realized that this was a test not just of knowledge but of perception. Could he see what was not being said? Could he understand motives behind words? Slowly he began to answer questions, offer suggestions, and highlight potential threats that the Veshar delegation had not even considered. Lyra watched him silently, a faint smile on her face. She had trained him in the ways of observation and diplomacy, but she also recognized something deeper. Eric's human perspective was different, unpredictable, and therefore powerful. Where the Jarin relied on protocol, Eric relied on instinct and attention to small details. That combination, Lyra realized, could save her empire one day. By the end of the meeting, the Veshar delegation appeared satisfied. They had not revealed all their intentions, but they had acknowledged Eric's insights, nodding at his suggestions and even deferring to some of his judgments. Lyra spoke afterward in private. "You handled that well," she said. "Your human perspective saved us from possible deception. You are proving yourself, not only in force or courage but in thought." Eric smiled faintly, exhausted but proud. He was learning slowly that being human did not mean being weak. It meant thinking differently, seeing what others missed, and having the courage to act. But challenges continued to arrive. Word spread of increased unrest in distant systems. Rebels and mercenaries saw the recent coup as an opportunity, assuming that the empire was distracted. Lyra called an emergency meeting with Eric included, asking him to review intelligence reports, propose defensive strategies, and assist in planning. Eric worked through the night, his human mind racing to connect dots, notice patterns, and suggest plans. He stayed calm under pressure, relying on logic, instinct, and observation. By morning, they had a detailed defensive strategy that accounted for multiple threats without committing excessive forces. Lyra was impressed. "Your plan is not perfect," she said, "but it is adaptable, human. That is what makes it strong. Others may rely on rigid strategies, but you have learned to bend without breaking." Eric realized that he was growing, not only as a consort but as a partner in leadership. The Empire was teaching him, but he was also contributing something new, something unexpected. One evening, after a long day of planning and meetings, Lyra invited Eric to the palace gardens. The twin moons had risen, casting soft silver light across the crystal towers. Eric felt tired, but there was a quiet sense of satisfaction in his chest. "You are changing," Lyra said softly, her eyes reflecting the moonlight. "Not only in the eyes of the court, but in the eyes of your people and mine. I see it. You are learning to be more than human in a way. You are learning to be a leader." Eric shook his head. "I don't feel like a leader, I feel lucky. I react, I observe, I try my best. That is all." "That is enough," Lyra said. "Sometimes, trying your best and staying true is more powerful than any skill or weapon." Eric looked at her, feeling a strange warmth in his chest. He had been afraid of this bond at first, afraid that it was forced, that it was meaningless. But now he realized that it was becoming real. Respect had grown into trust, and trust was growing into something deeper, something neither of them fully understood yet. The following weeks were a test of endurance. Eric continued to work alongside Lyra, handling council sessions, negotiating with alien diplomats, and helping plan defenses against potential threats. He made mistakes, yes, but each mistake was corrected with patience and guidance. Slowly, he felt more confident, more capable, more a part of this alien world than he had ever imagined. Then, one night, a message arrived from a distant star system. Rebels were preparing to attack a border colony, and they had acquired powerful weapons capable of devastating the surrounding area. The council panicked, unsure how to respond quickly enough. Lyra called Eric to her private chamber. "We need a plan," she said. "And we need it fast. You will help me design the response. Your perspective may be the difference between success and failure." Eric felt the familiar rush of fear and determination. He had never led an army, never commanded ships, never faced an enemy like this before. But he knew that he could think, observe, and act. And he had learned from Lyra, from the palace, and from his own instincts. Working side by side, they devised a plan that combined defensive positions, intelligence gathering, and small strike teams. Eric suggested using the terrain in unexpected ways, relying on timing and misdirection rather than sheer force. Lyra incorporated his ideas into the official strategy, giving him credit privately, but letting the court see the strength of the plan as a unified effort. When the rebels attacked, Eric watched from a command room, heart pounding as events unfolded. To his amazement, the strategy worked. The rebels were intercepted, their weapons neutralized, and the colony remained safe. The council hailed the Queen's leadership and praised her human consort for insight and courage. For the first time, Eric felt truly proud. He had acted, contributed, and survived challenges that would have destroyed most humans in his position. He was learning that being human was not a weakness, it was a hidden strength. Later, as he and Lyra walked through the quiet palace corridors, she spoke softly. "You have proven yourself, Eric, not by law, not by ceremony, but by courage, wisdom, and integrity. You are not just my consort, you are my partner." Eric felt a warmth in his chest. He realized that the bond they shared had grown beyond obligation. It was trust, respect, and perhaps the beginning of something deeper. He looked at her, at the calm determination in her eyes, and understood that together, they could face any challenge the galaxy threw at them. And as the twin moons rose over Jara, casting their silver light across the city, Eric Lane felt a new sense of purpose. He was human, yes, but he was also something more. He was a bridge between worlds, a partner to a queen, and a force that could change the course of history. The Empire had tested him, the galaxy had doubted him, and even he had questioned himself. But through every challenge, every fear, and every triumph, Eric had proven one thing, that humans, no matter how ordinary they seemed, could rise to meet the impossible. And in that quiet moment, under the moons of Jara, he knew that the next challenges would be even greater, and he was ready. Eric had never imagined that being human could have such an impact on an alien empire. In the weeks following the defense of the border colony, his name spread quietly through Jara. Humans were unusual, even strange to the Jaran, but now one human was known for courage, cleverness, and loyalty. He had earned respect, not through strength or technology, but through his mind and his heart. The peace of the palace, however, was fragile. Reports came from distant sectors. Rebel movements were gathering, trade routes were threatened, and rumors of alien mercenaries seeking to exploit the recent coup reached the Queen's council. Lyra consulted Eric more than ever. He now sat beside her at every meeting, reviewing intelligence, offering plans, and even speaking directly to ambassadors and council members. One morning, Eric was summoned to the council chamber early. The air was tense. Lyra was already there, standing near the central platform, her expression unreadable. A holographic map floated in the middle of the room, showing flashing red zones where trouble was brewing. "Eric," Lyra said quietly, "the situation has escalated. Rebels are not only attacking border colonies, they are seeking allies in neighboring systems. If we do not act quickly, the Empire will be fractured." Eric studied the map. Lines of communication, supply routes, and troop positions blinked in rapid succession. He felt the familiar mix of fear and determination. This was bigger than anything he had faced before. Lives, systems, and the stability of an entire empire rested on decisions he would help make. "We need to strike smart," he said slowly, "not just react. We can protect the borders but also disrupt their plans, use misdirection, hit supply lines, force them to fight on our terms, not theirs." Lyra nodded. "Agreed. Your perspective continues to be invaluable. Prepare to lead a mission with me. You will see action firsthand." Eric's heart skipped a beat. He had helped plan defenses and negotiated with diplomats, but leading a mission into enemy territory was another matter entirely. He felt fear, but he also felt readiness. He had learned to trust his instincts, to act even when unsure, and to rely on the strength of humans in ways the Djarin often underestimated. The plan was set. Lyra would lead the main fleet, while Eric, along with a mixed team of Djarin officers and human advisors, would strike at the enemy supply lines. Their goal was to cut off reinforcements, slow the rebel advance, and give the Empire time to respond strategically. As Eric prepared for the mission, he felt a strange mixture of nervousness and excitement. He checked his equipment, reviewed the maps, and went over every detail with the officers. Though he had no formal military training, he had learned enough to think quickly, adapt, and make decisions under pressure. The journey to the rebel supply zone was tense. Ships moved through asteroid fields, avoiding detection, and Eric remained at the command console, issuing instructions, coordinating with pilots, and anticipating enemy moves. He realized that humans had a unique ability to improvise. While the Djarin relied on protocol and hierarchy, Eric could adapt instantly, make decisions in the moment, and exploit opportunities that others would miss. When they reached the target area, the enemy forces were ready. Their ships were larger and more heavily armed, but Eric's strategy focused on speed, surprise, and precision. He guided small strike teams to intercept supply convoys, block escape routes, and disable communications. At first, the Djarin officers were skeptical of his approach. "You are risking too much," one shouted. Eric looked at him calmly. "Sometimes the safest path is not the direct path. Trust the plan." The plan worked. Rebel ships were trapped, their supplies captured, and communications disrupted. Eric coordinated every move, giving orders, adjusting tactics, and staying calm even as explosions and energy blasts filled space. For the first time, he realized that humans were not just survivors. They could be leaders, strategists, and forces that even advanced aliens could respect. When the mission ended, the fleet returned to Djara. The council and the citizens hailed the success. Eric's name was spoken with admiration and even awe. The Queen placed a hand on his shoulder in front of the council, a subtle but powerful acknowledgement of his contribution. That evening, Eric and Lyra walked through the palace gardens. The twin moons cast a silver glow over the crystal spires, and the air was filled with the scent of alien flowers. Eric felt exhausted but exhilarated. "You were remarkable today," Lyra said softly. "I have never seen a human act with such clarity, courage, and strategy." Eric smiled faintly. "I just did what I thought was right. I reacted, I observed, I tried to help. That's all I can do." "No," Lyra said firmly. "You were more than that. You are extraordinary. Your presence has changed the Empire, and not just in ways of strategy. You have shown the Council, the citizens, and even me that humans have strength we did not understand." Eric looked at her, feeling a warmth he could not name. Their bond had grown beyond law or ceremony. It was trust, respect, and something deeper, something that felt like friendship, and perhaps more. The next days were quieter, but tensions remained. Rebel activity had slowed, but whispers of larger threats continued. Eric spent time learning more about the Empire, its history, and its people. He met citizens, traders, and scholars, discovering that humans had much to teach the Jaren, just as they had learned from them. His presence became a bridge, a living example of cooperation between species. One evening, while observing the city from the palace balcony, Eric noticed a commotion in the streets below. A crowd had gathered, cheering and waving banners. At first he did not understand, but then a young Jaren boy ran up to him. "Human, you are the one who saved the colonies. You are the hero of the Empire," the boy shouted. Eric felt a strange mix of embarrassment and pride. He had acted out of instinct, not for glory, but to hear such words was humbling. The people were beginning to see humans not as fragile outsiders, but as capable, brave, and valuable allies. Lyra joined him on the balcony, her eyes following the boy and the cheering crowd. "This is the result of your actions," she said softly. "Not only strategy, but courage, honesty, and loyalty. You have shown the galaxy that humans are more than they appear." Eric felt a sense of purpose unlike anything he had known. He realized that his accidental marriage, once a source of confusion and fear, had become an opportunity. He could influence the course of history, protect lives, and create bonds between worlds that had never existed before. As the weeks passed, Eric and Lyra continued to strengthen the Empire. Rebels were gradually subdued, trade routes reopened, and diplomatic relations improved. Humans began to arrive on Jara, not as visitors or merchants, but as valued partners. The Queen's decision to keep Eric by her side had proven wise, and the Empire flourished under the combined guidance of Jaren tradition and human adaptability. Eric began to notice something else, his own feelings toward Lyra. He admired her strength, her intelligence, and her calm determination. He cared for her deeply, not just as a queen or a partner in strategy, but as someone who had become part of his life in ways he had never expected. One evening, they stood together on the palace balcony, looking out over the glowing city. The twin moons reflected in the crystal towers, and the stars above stretched endlessly across the sky. Eric felt a sense of peace he had never known. "Eric," Lyra said quietly, "you have changed this empire and perhaps even me. Your presence has shown that strength is not only in power or history, but in courage, honesty, and heart." Eric looked at her, feeling the depth of her words. I never thought I could do anything like this. I was just a simple human, flying ships and delivering cargo. I never imagined I would be here with you, helping an entire empire survive and grow." "You are more than simple," Lyra said softly. "You are human, and that is your greatest strength. You have shown that even the smallest, most ordinary beings can do extraordinary things." Eric felt a warmth in his chest, realizing that he had found purpose, respect, and connection in a world that had once seemed impossible. He looked at Lyra, and for the first time he felt certain of something in his life, that he belonged here not by accident but by choice. In the months that followed, Eric continued to grow as a leader, a partner, and a bridge between worlds. Humans began to be welcomed on Jara as scholars, traders, and advisors. The empire flourished in ways no one had predicted, and the bond between human and Jaran became a symbol of hope and cooperation throughout the galaxy. Through it all, Eric never forgot how it had started. One simple accident, one misinterpreted ceremony had brought him to this world. He had not sought fame, power, or recognition. He had simply been himself, a human, with instincts, courage, and a willingness to act when it mattered, and that had been enough. As Eric and Lyra stood together on the palace balcony one final evening, looking out at the glowing city and the stars beyond, he understood something profound. The galaxy had been changed, not by weapons or technology, but by the simple, quiet strength of a human being willing to stand up, speak the truth, and act with courage. And in that moment, Eric Lane knew that his life would never be the same again, not because of ceremony or law, but because of the choices he had made, the bonds he had formed, and the heart he had shown. He had accidentally wed an alien queen, and his world and the galaxy would never be the same.